Welcome in to another edition of the Old North State Sports Show, folks. Panthers news is slowing down a little bit. The momentum, you can kind of feel it tampering off, but hey, still a lot to talk about. And you can see here on the right-hand side of my screen today, we're going to talk about the NFL Hall of Fame. The NFL honors are tomorrow. We'll get to know all the awards. We'll also get to know who made it into the Hall of Fame. And unfortunately, it sounds like this year's class could be as small as 3 players plus a coach, the designation that they have contributor to the game. Could be a very small class. They changed some of the rules. I'd recommend going out to Panthers.com. Darren Grant put together a great article explaining the differences in voting this year, the fact that you have to get 80% of the vote. You can't round up. There's a lot of nuances to it. So unfortunately, good or bad, probably more bad than anything, we will have to see how this year plays out. Now, you have 2 Panthers, of course, Steve Smith Sr. and Luke Kuechly, that are up. They've made it this far. So know more than likely these guys are going to get in at some point. We're going to look at their resumes in just a minute. But before we do that, when you think about the style of play of both of these guys, one on the offensive side of the ball, tenacious guy in Steve Smith Sr. I mean, we all know ice up. That's who he was. He put up really good stats. I mean, when you compare him to guys that are in the Hall of Fame, the one thing that he doesn't have compared to most are touchdowns. Now, touchdowns aren't everything, but he absolutely has an NFL resume. So for him, you look at him more as a statistical player. Like he put up the stats, he put up the numbers. There's no doubt about it. Luke Kuechly, also really good numbers on his resume as well. And we've seen comparable linebackers get into the Hall of Fame, but it's a career that ended a little bit shorter. So does that become a factor? I don't think it should. Personally, when you analyze both of these players, I don't think they're both going to get it at the same time. Like I just don't. For me, you look at how long Steve Smith Sr. has been on the ballot. Is this year he makes the jump? Or do we see a surprise with Luke Kuechly potentially making it in over him? I don't know that they would do that, but I will tell you this. The thing about Luke Kuechly, even though his time ended shortly in the NFL, he did not play as long as we would have loved to have him, especially in Carolina. There is no doubt the impact that he had. So shorter career, impact, unbelievable. Kind of reminds me of a Calvin Johnson-esque type player. Hands down, the best at his position in his prime. Teams didn't want to play him. I listened to Ron Rivera. Speaking of Ron Rivera, we're going to talk about what he's doing now in just a minute. But I was listening into WFNZ today, Mac and Bone in the morning show. They were talking about, or Ron Rivera was talking about when he would have to talk to other opposing coaches and how difficult it was to scout against Luke Kuechly because of his knowledge of the game. He was so smart, and we all know that had to do with the film. We know that had to do with them trying to kick him out of the film room on Christmas. This guy is in there staying late watching film. It is insane. But all right, let's get into it. We'll start off, actually go back, start off with Steve Smith Sr. Lots of stats on here. We'll kind of go through these high level. 8th in the NFL, in NFL history in receiving yards with 14,731. One of 14 players in NFL history with at least 1,000 career receptions. He has 1,031. His postseason rankings, 1 of 15 with at least 1,000 postseason receiving yards. 9 career receiving touchdowns, is tied for 9th all time, or at the time when he retired. His 218-yard receiving performance at Chicago in 2006 ranks 5th highest for a single game. And then we know as a franchise leader what this guy is. All-time receiving leader in yards, touchdowns, total touchdowns, scrimmage yards, all-purpose yards, and 100-yard receiving games. Also holds the franchise record for most receiving yards in a season. I mean, we can keep reading through these. I'm not going to read through them all, but the resume is there. And to me, when you stack him up against other guys that are in the Hall of Fame, and I did this right before on Stat Muse, he's a Hall of Famer, folks. I think it's just a matter of when. And again, it's unfortunate that either both of these guys are not getting in, or maybe one gets in over the other. In due time, both guys are going to get into the Hall of Fame, and it's nice for Carolina Panthers fans to have homegrown guys that were here, that we've developed. We're a young franchise, but we have the talent. So, taking a look now at the one and only Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly played 8 seasons for the Panthers, too short, as we all know. He had 688 solo tackles, 402 assists, puts him at 1,090, 12 and a half sacks, 9 fumble recoveries, and 18 interceptions. He was selected to 7 Pro Bowls back when Pro Bowls were actually played as a football game and not flag football and other games that are associated with it. When I meant a little more, I remember listening to sports radio this week, and people were talking about how when current players get to the end of their careers and we talk about Pro Bowls and analyzing their resume for the Hall of Fame or just their overall how good they were, we're going to see Pro Bowls on there for some weird guys because of all the opt outs. I don't know how you fix it. 7 Pro Bowls, 1 Defensive Player of the Year award, and the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. This guy was good. Stats, again, he has really good stats. Of course, like if he played a little bit longer, there's no doubt he would have been near the top, in my opinion, in a lot of these categories. But limited, and what you cannot discount is who he was as a player, how smart this guy was. So, hey, we'll be tuned in, hopeful that we see one of our Carolina Panthers make it into the Hall of Fame. It would be nice. You could have Julius Peppers, then you go into maybe Steve Smith Sr., and then Luke Kuechly, or vice versa. 3 Panthers players in a row for 3 years in a row getting into the Hall of Fame. I'm here for it. Absolutely here for it. The other thing that I'm here for is the coaching staff getting completed. It's important that we build out this staff. According to Mike Kay, good friend of the show, writes for the Charlotte Observer, great work. The Panthers are hiring former Rams and Cardinals defensive back Kevin Peterson as a defensive assistant. Per league sources, Peterson spent last year coaching at Colorado State University Pueblo after taking part in a fellowship program with the Rams and the Cardinals. So not a lot of coaching history. You can see his playing history on the right, cornerback primarily. You'd have to lean into the fact he's probably going to be some type of defensive back assistant. Remember, we just let our assistant defensive backs coach go. Probably a good fit for where he's going to go. And it's funny, you see all the ties to Rams. Not this one in particular as far as Ejiro Evero and his scheme, but it's just funny to see how all of this stuff plays out. So the defensive staff is coming together. And again, Ejiro Evero still here. I don't know. This was his staff for the last 2 years with no changes, shaking things up. How much is this going to make a difference? A lot to see. We will find out when we get there. Now, speaking of Ron Rivera, as I spoke about him just a minute ago, and Mac and Bone, I was listening to him today. Congrats to Ron Rivera. He did not announce this on the show. He did hint at coming back into coaching. You can see his tweet here. Coach Belichick is made going back to school. Cool. Stay tuned. I am coming home. Cal, go Bears. So look at that. And this is a picture of him during his playing days at the University of Cal. So Ron Rivera headed back. Now, is he going to be a coach? I mean, I don't know. Maybe an assistant, to be determined what his role is going to be. But I'm excited for him, man. And you just think about, he's 63. He's been interviewing. His time in the NFL may be up. A lot of life left in him. When you think about Bill Belichick still coaching at 73, Mac Brown was up until 73. That's another 9-10 years. There's a lot of football left. And I know, I just feel like for these guys, the desire to be in and around football, and especially coaching football, is where it's at. Sure, he could do a fantastic job as an analyst if he wanted to, but I'm excited for Ron Rivera to get back into it. Now, the last thing we'll talk about to close out today's episode are Senior Bowl standouts. Again, Senior Bowl has come and gone. The draft starts there. This is from Panthers.com. We'll take a look at the 5 prospects that stood out. Panthers.com. And I believe this article is from Cassidy Hill. A big name that's shooting up a lot of boards, in particular with the Panthers, Mike Green, the edge out of Marshall. You also have Walter Nolan, a defensive tackle out of Ole Miss, and Shamar Stewart, an edge out of Texas A&M. It feels like, TBD where we land in free agency just yet, but, defensive side of the ball, regardless of what we do, still going to be an important position group to draft. Defensive front, hands down. Safety as well. A lot of work to do with the safety room. Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Iowa State. I saw a lot of people talking about him. That's who's pictured here. Sorry, his knee's cut off in this image. That's what we get. I was slowly getting the edits together. It's 11:15 as I record this, but hey, got to get the work in. And Jack Beck, wide receiver out of TCU. So those are your 5 standout prospects. And if you are wondering, when are you going to get another mock draft from me? Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a while. I may do one more before free agency. Possibly. We'll see. I'm just at this point, I even tweeted it today. Some people are on their mock draft 9.0, 10.0, 11.0. I don't know how. What exactly has changed? The roster construction is still the same. You can't change that. I mean, you're just throwing out whoever. So for me, I want to see what free agency does and how we navigate that. Then I can make a decision on if I want, who I really think the team is going to be targeting. And we're going to have a month, and I can do another 4 mock drafts, close it out, and kind of really fine tune what I think is going to happen for the Panthers. But anyways, folks, that is going to do it for today's episode. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.